And we have challenges like everyone else, especially around homelessness and mental health and, making sure that law enforcement is trusted. But those are things we can work towards. And as part of that is just having a conversation. And, as local leaders or as elected leaders, I think showing up goes a long way. So making sure we get out into our communities, that we're engaging with people, because even if someone is angry, if they at least feel heard, I might not be able to do anything about it. And that's what I'm really learning through the emails I get from constituents every day saying, this one thing is my one issue and I need you to help solve it. And being able to say, I hear you. Let me try to find someone who can help you with that. But these are the things I'm focusing on right now. And let's work together on those things.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast focused on incredibly talented people who've dedicated themselves to public service when their country and communities needed it the most. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of The New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. Check out newdealleaders.org to find out more.
My guest today is the new mayor of Fargo, North Dakota, Josh Boschee. A New Deal leader since he was in the legislature, Josh won a 5-way race with nearly 47% of the vote back in June and is now serving as Fargo's first full-time mayor. The mayor and I talk about the issues that he's hearing most from his constituents in this fast-growing city and about the levers available to city leaders to address rising costs, particularly housing. We also talk about how the Democratic Party brand has changed over time in his state, how he's engaging and connecting with voters, and why he thinks the most important thing Democrats can do in North Dakota is to show up. I hope you enjoy. Mayor Josh Boschee, welcome.
Thanks. So good to be here.
So nice to talk to you. I'm so excited to talk to you after your big victory as mayor of Fargo, North Dakota. Congratulations. How's it going so far?
Thanks. It's been a very fun first 31 days. It's going lightning speed, but learning a lot, thinking a lot about all the opportunities going forward for a fast growing city like ours, but just excited to be in the position. So the honeymoon has not worn off. I keep saying, and I keep telling everyone I'm bottling up all the good vibes while I can, because I know the arrows will start coming soon enough. So
yeah, I love it. Well, it's very exciting. And this is, I just learned, you're the first full-time mayor of Fargo. I'm just super curious, like what prompted the decision to go to a full-time mayor from what it had been before?
Yeah, no, which is a huge lift, because otherwise I wouldn't have probably been able to do it just from an affordability standpoint. But our city commission for a number of years had looked at it. The previous mayor was termed out, so that allowed for an open race for me. But he had advocated it for years. He was a practicing physician. He recognized that if we wanted good people to run for office that weren't just retired or independently wealthy, we had to make the job more accessible, especially since the work was full-time. I mean, he was already working. The previous mayors all had worked well over full-time into the role as, a growing city in the upper Midwest. So he finally got that across the finish line as part of his final term, and I'm grateful for that.
So that's so great. So tell me a little bit about the race. It was not you. A lot of people jumped in. It was an open race. So tell me about how that played out and kind of what you saw as the dynamics in winning.
Yeah. So the Fargo mayor and our city commission are nonpartisan races. So as a well-known Democratic leader across the state, I was excited to jump in and build off of my electoral successes in the legislature or in my legislative seat, but then also the work I had accomplished in the legislature. So it ended up being a 5-way race. It's a June primary race, so no, it falls on the partisan primary calendar, but there's no primary, there's no runoff, so it's just top vote getter wins. And this is coming on the heels of the voters in Fargo in 2018 passed approval voting. So up until now, the mayor and the city commissioners people could vote for one or all 5 of us if they wanted, or anything in between. Well, that no longer existed in this race. So in a 5-way race, I was able to, secure a resounding mandate, we're saying is the language people are using around here, but received 48% of the vote. in a five-way race. And so I was excited to have the strong support of folks across the city, cross-partisan lenses, ideology, and of course from a variety of backgrounds. So
that's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. I mean, that's a big deal in a five-way race. I mean, what were you talking about that you think most resonated with the voters? What were you hearing most from them as you were going around the city?
Yeah, it really comes back to, again, I think what makes us New Dealers, right? It's this pragmatic approach to finding solutions. So, as a Democrat running in a nonpartisan race, certainly people understood where I stood with my values as a partisan. But when it came to being a leader, seeing the accomplishments I have done in Bismarck, especially around housing issues. So really front and center talked about affordability. As a growing city, we use bonding and financing as a tool. So people were concerned about the growing amount of what's perceived debt, what's actual debt, but it's all paid for. It's financed. It's got a payment plan. So that was a big discussion. So being able to talk about complex budgets and how do we move the needle on that. And then, of course, the third was public safety. So as a growing city, we, like a lot of places across the country, we're seeing violent crime go down, which is good. But then there's an opportunity for how do we work with our public safety professionals to capitalize on that decrease, to really start doing more proactive community policing, engaging with neighbors and neighborhoods to make sure everyone feels safe at a time where the unexpected continues to pop up, and we want to be prepared for that.
You've mentioned a couple of times about the growing city. So tell me about how fast is it growing? What does that mean for you? What are some of the infrastructure needs that you're seeing as you guys grow? Is that growth coming from other parts of the state, or are people coming in from other places? I know you're the fastest growing part of North Dakota. Are you the fastest growing part in the region too? What's going on there?
Yeah, we're one of the fastest growing cities in the upper Midwest. We're the 11th most economically diverse community in the Midwest, or in the nation, excuse me. So that's allowed us to be really resilient. So you think about the 2008 crash, the 2010 crash, we were pretty insulated from a lot of that. And a lot of that has factors with, our regional economy, commodity-driven things. But our Fargo itself was insulated. We didn't have housing crash. We didn't have a lot of people laid off. We were able to continue to grow. And so businesses invest in Fargo. We have people moving here because of our tax structure throughout the state, but also because we butt up against Minnesota, who, is seen as a pretty good progressive state. There's a lot of spillover that happens. So there's good policies when it comes to things like transit or social services and healthcare. And so we're we're well positioned both geographically and our economics to be a good place for businesses to start, but people to raise their families. We're kind of an entrepreneurial eco-center for the Midwest, a lot of investments there, but it's allowed us to grow. So Fargo is part of a metro area. We call ourselves the Greater Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Metro. So Moorhead being on the Minnesota side, Fargo and West Fargo on North Dakota. So Fargo itself is 140,000 people now, but the metro is about 250 as we continue to grow and kind of absorb or merge into some of the smaller communities. So with that, Fargo is the biggest community or the city within that metro. So as much as sometimes people aren't excited about us being the beast in the room, they look to us for leadership. They want to see what we're going to do on things like transit, public safety, housing affordability. So it gives us an opportunity to provide a lead, not just the region, but the entire state.
We're hearing a lot about affordability. You mentioned it a couple of times too on, across the country, right? And I think there was, I don't know, I find it super interesting, to be honest, that people are like, we know housing's expensive on the coasts, and I keep saying to people, I talk to people all over the country all day long. Housing is expensive everywhere. The same things, that affordability challenges that we're seeing, in some of what people think of as the expensive parts of the country is a misnomer. Like it's everywhere. And so I'm sure affordability loomed large in your race. You mentioned it in terms of housing costs. What other things were you hearing about in terms of what people are struggling with in terms of cost of living issues day to day?
Yeah. Well, and with housing specifically, my background, I'm a real estate agent and broker. So, that's really where I honed in on that conversation. But the challenge is, of course, specifically around housing, it's hard for us as local leaders to impact labor and lumber, right? The cost associated with that. So it really comes down to what levers can we pull to make housing affordable, whether you're going to buy your home or you rent your home. And beyond housing, it's everything from gas to groceries. The fees going up for put your kids in youth baseball because there's more expenses to the park district. We're experiencing that at the city. As I became mayor on July 1st, they kicked off the budgeting process the months prior. So I've inherited a budget development process from the previous mayor and commission that right now we're going to be asking. The ask to our residents of Fargo is a $14 per month increase in utility fees. That's
Wow.
huge. And as the guy who is running on affordability, I'm trying to find every lever I can pull to say, how can we spread this out over 5 years? What can we do from a financing end? We can't ask our residents for that increase when we know that their groceries and their gas is going up. But city and state government is no different than a household in the fact that, the cost of concrete is going up, the cost of labor is going up. Tariffs are hitting us all hard, whether it's, again, lumber for your house or machinery to plow streets when we prepare for winter here in Fargo. And so, the biggest thing I've learned in throughout the campaign, but also just my professional background as a realtor, is how do we create sustainability and reliability for the business market to operate? And that's unfortunately what our federal government continues to screw up under this administration, but Congress isn't helping us at all either. And that's really trickling down to the states and local, where when Congress doesn't act, our states have to act. And if our states don't act, it falls upon us as local leaders to try to find that solution.
What do you think you're going to focus on as a local? Like you said, you've got limited levers, but yet people are still looking to you to deliver. And I think also, like, if we're thinking about this from a political sense, right, I really believe strongly that, like, the best politics is the best governing. As you know, I believe that. And so, we have to figure out ways, as you were saying, to do this anyway, even in this crazy, hard environment, to deliver for people. Like, so what are you looking at as kind of one of your first or second things that on the docket to try to alleviate some of that with the power that you do have?
Yeah. I'll talk about home ownership first and then go on to renters. 56% of my community are people who rent their homes. So it's a significant population. So from the housing affordability or building a new home or rehabbing houses is first and foremost making sure we're protecting the existing housing stock we have. We have a lot of single family homes that are rentals, especially being a college strong community. So looking at what kind of incentives can we do to help landlords get their homes prepared and then have deed restrictions that say that has to be single owner occupied or owner occupied after when they prepare to sell, or working through like contract for deed as a financing tool with those owners. A lot of these folks who have rented for decades in this home. So is it a path to home ownership? When it comes to building new homes, the levers we have as a city is we have a number of open lots. It's more expensive for the park district and school district to mow and maintain some of the property they've set aside. So are there opportunities for us to have conversations about how do we build affordable housing there for their workforce or for nurses and law enforcement in our community? So putting housing closer to those schools or as part of property that's been held by the park district for decades as part of their future growth plans. So really having that conversation about what assets do we have in our community to build housing and work with partners like the Community Land Trust we have here, Rebuilding Together, Habitat for Humanity. How do we help groups like Habitat for Humanity do planned development? Again, we talk about our metro region here. So we're spread out, and Fargo itself is 50 square miles. Their efficiency of using volunteers when they have to go from community to community to community. Well, what if we have a tract of land that can be set up to be kind of building by Habitat for Humanity, so they have an entire development they're working on all at once, so they're building more housing faster with the volunteers they have on staff. So really thinking, I think, differently about how we develop housing. I'm excited to put out a call to our community of, again, I talk about these lots we have available in the city of Fargo. So saying we want duplex and triplex living in these infill lots. bring us your ideas and we'll incentivize, however we can. So I think, we're an entrepreneurial community, so there's ideas that are out there, but a lot of times we depend on the existing developers, the people who are already building homes, instead of maybe asking people who want to get in that space or want to start their own business and have some ideas to make that work. That's what I've really appreciated about, New Deals, again, the task force on housing, and hearing from other mayors and county leaders who are talking about some of the innovation they're doing in their community within their own land codes of how can they pull those levers. Moving on. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just say thank you for that, because it is. I'm excited about how many people are doing cool stuff actually around this, and I feel like that gets lost in the conversation about everything's so bleak, but there's really exciting stuff happening, and people are doing really good things. So I'm so delighted that you're going to be able to do some of that in Fargo. But please, tell me what else is on people's minds.
Yeah, well, again, I think going back to what I'm learning from the mayors that are part of New Deal that I've been able to look up to through this race, I learned as a real estate broker. And obviously as a policymaker, we make black and white laws for a gray world. So often my agents that I supervise as a broker would come forward and say, can I do this? Or I need this for my client. And often the answer always was no. That's how I started out as a broker. And I've evolved to, how do we get to yes? And that's what I think I'm seeing with a lot of our mayors. We have land development codes, we have regulations and zoning, but someone comes with an idea. How do we get to yes? How can we make this work to see if it'll work? And it could be a pilot or a model for ongoing innovation and growth, especially in housing. For our renters, we don't have strong renter protections in North Dakota. And so the city has a tool where we could look and develop what's called a rental registry. There's a couple communities in town or in our state that have that. And that's a way that we can affect regulation around safety. And with safety, I think, comes some affordability. So, we have a number, rents going up for everybody. It's the same here in Fargo. But I hear from people that their rent's going up, but the washer and dryer still hasn't been fixed for a year, or the security door has continually been broken for 2 years. So what am I paying for? So those are some ways that we can come in and regulate on behalf of the tenants to support them, on top of really looking at some of these predatory practices we're seeing in regards to averaging utility rates throughout the building. And when there's vacant units, passing that on to the current tenants. We're seeing here in our community where tenants will get a bill for $20 the first month, and then the next month is $180 depending on vacancy. So it's not something people can budget for. And then it impacts their rental credit and all those things if they can't make those payments. So, really exploring and hearing those stories. I think in our community, people don't understand some of the living situations folks are in, especially from a safe living perspective. So really kind of shining a light on that and recognizing that we have great landlords and property managers. There are people who are providing awesome housing for people. And how do we just set a bar that says this is where we need to be? It's not about more regulation for everybody. It's about what's our bar for safe living in Fargo, and how do we make sure we get people all the way to that bar? And then we can have a conversation about expanding that.
I want to connect some dots, because I love what you were talking about the how do we get to yes. I feel like that is such a important, succinct way to say what I feel like government needs to do right now. I think for too long people thought the government was the problem and not the solution, and I think that that's affecting and as Democrats we get a disproportionate share of blame for that, because we're the party that thinks government can do good things. So if it's not working, we get blamed more. I'm really, and you talked a little bit about that as part of your campaign, that you were hearing from people, or that it was resonating with people, that you were talking about solutions. How do you square that? I mean, I think what we hear nationally is like, everybody's mad. Everybody's so mad. Everybody wants fairly, reasonably and rightfully mad, as they should be. And they're looking for answers now, and they want people who are going to deliver now, which again, I think is completely fair given, how hard it's been for people lately, but made infinitely worse by this administration. So how do you feel as a leader of a city? Are you hearing that anger? And as somebody who's, clearly really thoughtful and, kind of solutions driven, I personally think that people who are solutions driven are just as mad. We just don't always express it the same way. But so I'm kind of curious about how your kind of demeanor and your, focus on solution match the moment for people if they are feeling that anger.
Yeah. I appreciate that question, because, throughout the campaign, what I wasn't prepared for was the feedback I was getting from people. And honestly, being a Midwesterner wasn't, didn't feel good receiving the compliments of, they kept using the word hope. They kept saying things like, you just give us hope. And, maybe it's their ability to trust me. Folks knew me as far as the work I'd been doing in Bismarck and always on behalf of our community before that. So I think we're at a time where, yes, we're divisive and there is anger and frustration, but we're swinging back. There's a lot of people who want to work towards solutions. They're either done being angry or they recognize that, anger hasn't driven results either. And so that's what was exciting through the campaign. So, we made a conscious, my campaign team and I, we made a conscious effort to say, we aren't going to get in the mud. We're not going to point fingers. We are just going to focus on moving this community forward. Again, we're fortunate. It's a great community. There's a lot of awesome things happening in Fargo. And we have challenges like everyone else, especially around homelessness and mental health and, making sure that law enforcement is trusted. But those are things we can work towards. And as part of that is just having a conversation. And, as local leaders or as elected leaders, I think showing up goes a long way. So making sure we get out into our communities, that we're engaging with people, because even if someone is angry, if they at least feel heard, I might not be able to do anything about it. And that's what I'm really learning through the emails I get from constituents every day saying, this one thing is my one issue and I need you to help solve it. And being able to say, I hear you. Let me try to find someone who can help you with that. But these are the things I'm focusing on right now. And let's work together on those things, right? So bringing people along, engaging them, I think goes a long way. And again, I think a lot of our new dealers know that. That's what makes us the pragmatic leaders we are, trying to find solutions. I always tell folks, when people ask about New Deal and what does that mean that you're part of this cohort? And I say, well, we're pragmatic democratic leaders, but a lot of us would be considered progressive and liberal in a lot of spaces. We just want a path to get to that, right? So it's not that I don't believe in some of those things that, especially the left side of our party is at. It's just, I want to get there, and there's a path to getting there. It's not going to happen overnight currently in our in our form of government.
Did you have a pretty far left leaning voting block in Fargo for this race, out of curiosity?
Yes, I think, we had, what was impressive about this race is, I think when I get the data back from the Secretary of State, we're going to see that there was a significant increase of young voters who, again, I think were more progressive. 4 years ago in the mayor's race, only 14,500 people voted for the mayor. This year, 21,000 people voted. And so we saw a record, 50% increase in turnout. And then with 48% of that vote secured in a 5-way race, just showed me that there were people who were energized across the political spectrum. I was able to secure strong endorsements from very conservative business leaders in this community. But again, they were looking for someone that was dependable, that could lead and not throw shocks into the system, because they want to continue to grow their businesses here or build developments, and someone who understands that we have to have good plans in place to do that. And so that's what I'm most proud of is, really being able to build that strong, diverse coalition of people to be engaged in our community and get across the finish line.
That's so great. And broad ideologically, it sounds like too. I think that something you're talking a lot about is something I'm hearing from other leaders around the country that we're having these conversations about kind of where Democrats go from here and thinking about 26 and 28, which is this idea of just showing up. And I feel like, I don't want to throw my throw my friends in Washington under the bus, but I do kind of feel like it gets overlooked sometimes, right? That like surely it can't be that. It has to be about messaging and fundraising and all. And not that those things are not super important, but I'm hearing it so much. I just want to call it out, which is, you kind of talked about the fact that people know you and trust you, and you have a track record from the legislature, and that you, and so to me that makes perfect sense on why you personally could build that kind of coalition that is that includes business leaders who are looking for stability and includes more progressive folks who are looking for goals that they know that you share with them. So can you just talk a little bit more about what showing up looks like? What did you do from a campaign perspective, and then how do you translate that into being a mayor and showing up?
Yeah. So my political start was I was an Obama organizer, right? So organizing has been part of my DNA. It's actually what I love about the job, and community engagement is such a key part of that. So the most important part I think about showing up is not, making sure that after you're elected or not elected, that you continue to show up. And that's really what my legislative district team, we were a three-way team in North Dakota. So you have a senator and 2 state representatives. So we always had town halls. We had regular engagement. People knew what to expect, and that there would be a quarterly town hall or a monthly town hall during legislative sessions. So we just continued that practice through the campaign. And it's hard. I've said that to the staff here at City Hall I'm 31 days in, and all I've been in is meetings all day, and I've not been able to get out to the community like I want, especially as someone who's running on stronger engagement from the city to the public. But I think we just have to show up. And from an analysis standpoint, you think about how, whether it was an Obama voter, Obama Trump voters, or Trump voters, people wanted change, right? And as a candidate, those candidates showed up everywhere, where the incumbents only showed up when their time allowed or it was convenient. And we see that now, especially within primaries in the Democratic Party, but also in the Republican Party. Candidates are able to show up more than the incumbent. And you just have to make sure as an incumbent, you're showing up even when you're not supposed to be showing up, right? So creating that as part of your process and your ongoing engagement. And, again, we see that now with members of Congress specifically. And, in North Dakota, our member of Congress she's done virtual town halls, but she's not meeting with people in public. She's not having conversations where people live. It's being couched as everyone can show up. Well, there's some truth to that, but, people want to engage, especially in small communities like Fargo or states like North Dakota. We're used to seeing our elected leaders at the grocery store and at church on Sunday. And so, we got to keep showing up. And so that's my advice to anyone, whether you're running as a candidate or you're an elected, is you just got to find ways to create that cadence of regularly showing up, even when it's not convenient.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, and you, I'd be remiss to not talk about North Dakota as a state, because it is such a ruby red state. And we were talking earlier before we came on, I was like, would you consider Fargo a blue dot in a red state? And you said a purple to blue dot in a red state. So maybe you can expand on that. But I'm kind of curious about how you think about, what it would, you're on the ground there, what it would take for Democrats to do better in a state like yours, generally speaking. Like, what kind of things are people listening for? Why have Democrats had a hard time in states like yours?
Yeah. Well, when I started out in politics, North Dakota was a Democratic state. We had a congressional delegation of 2 senators and a member of Congress that were Democratic NPLers. Yeah. And that's evolved, Senator Heitkamp being our recent U.S. Senator, and then our statewide offices have been Republican for going on 3 decades now. But in a supermajority Republican legislature, North Dakotans are fiercely independent. And the challenge we have as Democrats, both locally and nationally, is our brand. And that brand hasn't been trusted, even though you and I and most people watching this know that Democratic values and the Democratic programs we've created over the last 100 years help support rural America, help support farmers and working class folks. And people just continue to not see us be that champion for them. And we have to figure that out. The bright light that I see as a North Dakotan versus a Democrat is, unlike a lot of places, our Republican primaries, specifically on legislative races, the last 2 cycles, the moderate, reasonable Republican has gotten across the finish line, and pretty strongly. And so that is our voters saying, when you bring up these bills about bathrooms or library books or things that aren't core to the function of government, we don't want any of that. And we're seeing our moderate Republicans do a better job of voting some of those things down because they have the backing of the voters who sent them against a more conservative or a MAGA candidate. And that's challenging for us as Democrats because, again, as somebody who's worked with the majority party and gotten a lot of things done, I've had to build compromise. I'm not there to fight them because I've not had to. There's certainly extremism, but the majority hasn't been extreme. And so that's been challenging for us. So both on the practicality of you work with who's there and get things done. And then the partisan side of things of, we have to figure out that brand and that messaging and both locally and nationally do a much better job of engaging folks. But also, as we see voter participation continue to decline across the country, that's not any different than North Dakota, which actually has some of the stronger voter participation across the country. But I really believe it's that the movable middle. I think it's those sometime voters who are choosing not to participate in the process, the decision makers, the people who actually decide who gets elected, are choosing not to show up anymore, and that's damaging. We have to figure out as a party, how do we inspire those people that we're the best candidate for them, and we're going to improve their quality of life and make things more affordable, so that they'll show up for us and get more of us across the finish line.
Yeah. When you talk about the Democratic brand being a liability, the word I'm paraphrasing, you didn't use that word, but in some ways, what's one thing that Democrats could do differently, or what is one thing that you think that people who don't, will not vote Democrats? Like what is it about Democrats that they're just saying this is why I could never be a Democrat?
That's tough, because part of that is, as some people, and you and I read about this in the headlines every day from whatever news journal, that we're supposed to give up some of our values or not talk about our values, right? Whether that's protecting trans youth or marriage equality or still wanting to move towards a universal healthcare system or whatever that looks like, we're supposed to stop talking about those things. And I don't think that's the case. I think we have to help people understand how, some of those things are just distractions and actually aren't improving your life. And the policy that we are good on, like healthcare, housing affordability, investment in public education, we're trying to improve your life and try to do a better job of making those connections with those folks. Again, when we look back over the last 2 decades of our coalition of the Democratic Party, specifically around working people and working people of color, is those communities didn't see us talking about them. They, and oftentimes we were in defense talking about other issues, or we got stuck in conversations we didn't want to necessarily have. But we have to figure out how to do a better job of, acknowledging the horrible legislation that's being introduced and standing up for vulnerable populations, but also pivoting to, this is how we're going to improve everybody's life, regardless of your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your race, your religion, your career. We are here to lift all ships, and that has always been the backbone of Democratic policies since FDR.
Yeah. No, I think you're so right about the fact that we get backed into these corners where people feel like, and we sometimes do it to ourselves, to be honest. We by being inclusive, which is something we all are, and then you start naming groups. I mean, I know this when I just try to thank a group of people, right? And you inevitably inadvertently leave someone off, and it's terrible. It's I think we've got to just talk about these things in a way that makes people understand we're talking about everybody. When we do this because we're worried about a certain group, which of course we are and we should be, but if we focus on talking about that in a narrow way, we sometimes, other people hear that as oh, you don't care about me, and I think that's, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing, and I'm saying I really agree with that. And I also think that, to that point though, I think you were alluding to it, but rural voters, I feel have felt like they are not on the agenda for Democrats, whereas we know from a policy standpoint that's not true. President Biden invested more in rural America, I think, than any other president. So there's, but there's this disconnect between the way maybe we talk about that and we and show up and go out and talk to people where they live. So I guess, does that feel right to you, or how are we going to win rural voters back specifically?
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of that is also, we understand that how we consume information, we are no longer really even controlling that. Even though I might choose to watch a certain news channel, what's being fed to me on my phone is all perfectly matriculated, algorithm towards me. And so how do we do a better job? Break down the barriers of getting people off their phones. And that's not something we're going to solve, but create space for people to be a part of their community again. And then I think for a local Democrat, how do we empower, especially in spaces like North Dakota, investing in allowing people and encouraging people to show up. I think that pendulum's coming back. We're, at least in North Dakota, within our state party, We are seeing where it used to, I think people kind of cowered a little bit behind being a Democrat or being open about a Democrat. In the last several cycles, we've seen many more people just stand up even stronger and not doing it from a standpoint of you're wrong because you're a Republican or I don't agree with your policy, but we all agree we need to save this school. We all need to make sure that, if industrial development is happening in our rural community because we have cheap electricity and accessible land and access to water, you're going to have to pay for that. And that means investing in our community. We're not going to give it away. So how do we put North Dakotans first and I think show through that value? And it's change doesn't happen overnight, right? But it's we're already, I think, seeing it, the fruit pay off as we try to do things throughout rural North Dakota, especially in places like the oil field out west or the center of the state where depopulation is happening very fast. Those are opportunities to, again, bring our democratic values and say we need to invest in these communities. And there's a lot we can agree on versus what we disagree on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking time today, Mayor. It's so good to see you. I'm going to end on a question I've been asking everybody. I hope I do it when I'm trying to compare apples to apples. So my question I've been ending on is, actually I have a question, I have a comment, but or two questions. I'm going to do two questions. My last real question is, if Democrats are going to win or be successful in my state, they need to blank.
They need to show up. I don't know if you want me to keep explaining because that's what I do.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So in rural spaces, there's been a study that's been done in rural Minnesota, and we're actually trying to replicate that throughout North Dakota, is you have this history of everyone has to essentially have an elected or appointed position. You elect every position in rural America. And because of that, it's created this space where if people don't show up for those positions, whether it's your county commission, the water board, then people who maybe don't have the best interest or the experience or the ability to do the work show up. And that's where we really see some degradation. So that's where I've been encouraging folks to show up in our community. It's the rural electric co-op. It's being on the water resource district. Sometimes it's not always about just the school board or the city commission. It's some of those other opportunities where you can show that you're a reasonable community leader and build that brand without having a letter tied to your name, and then move up into leadership, especially as we see the pendulum hopefully swing back to more moderation in states like North Dakota.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's a good reminder too. I remember, Heidi Heitkamp, back in the day of Tom Daschle in South Dakota, right? And we had, there were a lot of Democrats up there where you live. And so I think that we should not write it off and understand that there's a path back. My last question, which I just feel like people would be, think I was crazy if I didn't ask. I have to ask when you meet people, how often, I did just watch the movie again, Fargo, and how often do you get references to Fargo, the movie, when you meet people?
Every time. And it's interesting because our psyche as Fargoans, right? So when the movie came out, there was actually quite a bit of rejection locally. Like it didn't even happen here. Only like 10 seconds of the film takes place here.
Right.
But then when the TV series on FX came out, we just embraced it. And now it's our brand. And
I love that.
It's been great. A lot of the actors have been here now through our Fargo Film Festival. But even more so, what I love about Fargo, and what I'd encourage anyone that's out there, and hope we can host some new dealers here someday. People have low expectations, and they're just wowed when they get here about the amazing opportunities. Our beautiful downtown, great place to live for public education and families. So love that people have low expectations and they can be pleasantly surprised when they show up here.
I'm excited. Well, I'm coming to see you. I'm going to make a point to come see you this year, and I look forward to seeing it firsthand. So, but thank you. Congratulations on the win again. I'm so thrilled for you. Fargo is lucky to have you. You are going to do great things. And I really appreciate you kind of talking us through what it took for you to win in your city, but also kind of thinking about a state like North Dakota and where Democrats should go from here.
Thank you. Well, and thanks for your hard work and the team's hard work. You guys all played an instrumental role in helping with my race, but also connecting me on policy issues and other new dealers to talk about things that I should be considering as I ran for the race. So looking forward to connecting with everyone very soon.
Sounds great.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. And because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.